welcome friend of the show and USA Today best-selling romance author, C.A. Zarek. Yay!
Thank you for having me today.
Well, thank you for being part of the show. So you have written books in several genres, including romantic suspense, epic and historical fantasy romance, but there is always a romantic element in each. What draws you to write romance so often?
Um, I'm a hopeless romantic and I just love love. So I feel like any genre that I branch out into, and I have lots of things that are not published that are in different genres because I cannot pick a lane, evidently. So I feel like there's always going to be, I feel like there's romance everywhere. If you watch movies, you watch TV, there's always a romantic thread, no matter what genre you're watching. So I feel like it's realistic. Love is real, and I love to tell stories about it.
So how many books do you have? Because I know you have like in all genres and a bunch of them.
I have 17 now, as of right now,
17 novels
and 10 audiobooks.
and
Yes,
10
17
audiobooks.
novels. Actually, 17 novels, two short stories that are free, always free. And I'm in a couple anthologies, and then I have 10 audiobooks as well.
Wow. So with all those types of like different books, different genres, what is your favorite genre to write? Or do you even have a favorite?
I don't have a favorite. Usually what ends up happening is I'll write one genre because those people won't shut up in my head, and then I'll need a palate cleanser, and then I'll have to write a different genre. Like I have been, it has happened to me where I wrote like three romantic suspense books in a row, and if I had to write one more, I was going to scream. So it's like, even if I'm in the same series, for some reason, I just can't write the same thing in a row. I need that palate cleanser that is just that for me. That's switching genres. So I'll write a romantic suspense, then I'll need to write a Scottish Highlander time travel, or I'll have write a fantasy, and then I'll need to go back to romantic suspense. Just that's just how it is for me. I have to change it up. I don't want to stay in the same genre over and over again. Even though I do love them, I love each individual genre.
Well, do you find it's easier or your writing is easier, comes easier, or do you find it even stronger in one genre
Um,
versus another? Or
well, not really. I would say that, of course, it's easiest to write the romantic suspenses in a lot of ways because you're contemporary, it's real life. The slang, the cussing, because I always cuss in my books. I don't know. Like fantasy and stuff, as long as you do the groundwork, it's not difficult if you're in your own world, but it definitely requires more thinking, and I think more subconscious than if you're writing in a contemporary world. So a lot of times I feel like after I finish a fantasy, or a Scottish Highlander time travel, which they're also fantasy, but they're historical fantasy. I feel like I have to go back to the real world and romantic suspense, even though there's twists and turns and plot stuff. It's a little bit easier. Cars, they're going to drive, they're going to go to stores. It's not, it's different. So I think in each in their own way, they all draw me in different ways, but it definitely some require more thinking than others.
well, and the romantic suspense specifically is kind of more like in your wheelhouse as far as like your knowledge and background, right?
Well, I think it all is because I grew up reading fantasy. I didn't read anything but fantasy growing up. I always had my head in clouds, so to speak. So I feel like I always knew that I've been writing forever. I've been writing since I was 8 years old, but I wrote my first novel the first one I finished when I was 17, and it happens to be realistic fiction. But when I was 14, I wrote a vampire novel, because, right. The next year, I wrote, and I never finished it either, a fantasy story about a little girl, a teenage girl that finds a dragon egg in the woods. So I feel like it's always come from different directions, but I don't know. I have many passions. So I feel like I'm always going to follow that thread, that passion, as soon as the characters present themselves to me. So it really doesn't matter. I love paranormal too.
Well, yeah, and I know we've actually talked about that before, about like some of your paranormal, the ideas you have in your head for, and I know you have like a catalog of books that you want to write that are kind
Yes.
of just sitting back for the moment.
Yes.
Is there, I don't think I've ever asked you this or we've ever talked about it. Is there ever an idea or a book that you have just flat out abandoned, like you started writing and then just kind of left versus like, because I know since you published so many, has there ever been one that you just didn't finish or just kind of let loose?
Oh, tons. I have like probably 10 or 15 books on the computer that are somewhere in progress. I wouldn't use the word abandoned
Mm.
because I'll get there one day. But I probably like legit, I probably have 10 books that I have started on the computer that are very different things. One comes to mind, an Angels and Demons book that I really, really want to write, and that one will be a series. And then there's that, it's only like 2,500 words. And then I have a, a wolf book, Wolf Shifters, which is also going to be a series because I tend to write series. And it's like 32,000. So, it's just like when those people tell me it's their turn, I'll get to them. Because, even if I tried to write a standalone, I don't think that my characters would let me because they always, whether I want to or not, I always end up having very strong secondary characters. It's not on purpose, but it does make them more real. What ends up happening is the second person will be like, "It's my turn," and I'm like, "No, it's not." Go corner, and then they're like, "No, I want a book," and I'm like, "Shut up, go in the corner. I'm not. It's not your turn." And then eventually they'll all get their own books. And sometimes I know things characters that aren't even quote thought of, like I know who they'll end up with. Sometimes I even know their mate's name, even if I don't know very much about the story. It's really weird. I'm sure that the little people who run things in my head are always mad at me.
You always have ideas, right? Or they have ideas. They have other ideas.
Yeah, I am definitely an idea writer, brainstorm. So when my friends need help or whatever, I always have tons of ideas. I have more ideas than I have time for.
Yeah,
But
that's
and when it's time to start a new book, I just have to pick somebody.
it's kind
Goodness.
of a roll of the dice who ends up with like who ends up next, right? Because they're all fighting for the next spot.
Sometimes I'm really sure about it, and sometimes I'm not.
Mm.
So sometimes I know, like when I'm writing a current book, who is in the corner waiting. Um, and sometimes they won't shut the hell up. So I end up working on more than one thing at a time because, that's how urgent they are. Just really depends.
Mm. Well, and you kind of touched on it earlier, but where did this love of writing really begin, and when did you kind of start? Like, what led you to the road of like publishing your books?
Well, I always wanted to be a writer, so I'm not really sure where it comes from, other than writing and wanting to write. It's pretty much like breathing. So I'm not really, I don't know where it came from. Inside me, I guess. Destiny. I don't know. But about 2000, my very first book, which is called Swords Call, it's high fantasy or epic fantasy. Kind of like boy and girl again, let's save the world. And then we fall in love along the way. It definitely is a labor of love because I worked on that book for 112 years. So, but with that one, I knew I wanted to pursue publishing with it. And it's probably not the greatest example of my writing because as we start and as we keep going, we get better and better and better. It's subconscious. Sometimes it's, designed when you take classes and stuff, but honestly, just keep writing. You'll get better, whether you want to or not. It just happens. But I feel like with that book, I started it when I was probably legitimately 20 or 21, and it came to me in a dream. And then probably circa 2010, 2011, I wanted to pursue publishing, and I had no idea how to do it. No idea what was required, other than, you know, a Google search, and mostly what you'd find on Google back then. That was right at the cusp of e-publishing, right when things were getting kicked off, and I wasn't quite ready to do it all on my own. I kind of learned the ropes, so to speak, and I have been with two different publishers. I currently am just independent, 100% independent. If you want to do everything and you want to have decisions for everything and you want to be in charge of everything, independent is probably the way to go. But so I like that, like, you know, I'm in charge of the writing, the getting the book edited, the getting, you know, coordinating the cover. I make my own ebook files. I use an ebook distributor, but it's all on me. So that's good and that's bad. So there's pros and cons. It depends on what you want out of your career.
So, but you've gone both routes. So you kind of have experience with both. Do you prefer, but you don't prefer one over the other, do you? Or is it
No, I
just kind of
mean,
different?
like I said, there's pros and cons to both. If you want to be in control of everything and pay for everything, that's one of the cons of being self-published or an indie, is that the money's all on you. So it's all up front. So you pay for the editing, you pay for the cover, you pay for the photography, you pay your designers, you do all that. You pay for formatting. So that's definitely a con. But so for a lot of people like myself, hopefully it'll all wash out and then you'll make your money back on the book. So being with a publisher, none of that stuff is your decision. Sometimes not even the cover. So, but one of the pros is that you're not paying for anything. You write the book, you submit the book, they accept the book. They, you know, hopefully you have the same editor every time. You want to build a relationship with your editor. And they edit the book. They send it back to you. They tell you when they want the edits back. They tell you when it's coming out. They say, here's your cover. And some publishers let you say, no, I don't like that. And some publishers are like, here's your cover. We made it. So there, like I said, there's pros and cons for both. And then, of course, if you're going with a publisher, you're going to make less. I'm not going to say you're going to make less money per book, but you're going to definitely get paid in a different structure where your royalties, your publisher is going to get a percentage of your royalties, probably 40 or 50%, because they did pay for all that stuff for you. Because editing is expensive, covers are expensive, especially if you don't want to use stock. If you want to hire a photographer, work for the photographer, which a lot of publishers do, that's all, there's costs to everything. So it's pros and cons. A lot of publishers have hard deadlines. Some people work great with hard deadlines. Some people don't. So it just depends. So, but I'm not going to say that I don't know, preference isn't really the right word. Right now, I like how I have things, but I'm not going to say that I would never write for a publisher again. It would have to be the right publisher, the right amount of money, and they would have to do quite a bit of marketing, because that's a whole nother conversation. But when you're indie, everything's on you. And sometimes when you're with the publisher, everything's on you for marketing, getting the word out. And discoverability is the hardest thing to break through today in publishing. You can have an awesome, awesome, awesome book, but there's also legitimately about 1 million books come out every month on Amazon. So look how much competition that you have. So you have to have that standout book. You already have to have your fans, and they have to be waiting for that next book, and you can't make them wait too long. So everything's a toss up, you know. You have to be realistic about you're very likely not going to make $1 million, and you're very likely not going to make enough money to live on. So it just really depends. That's sad but true.
True. And then I know too, because you've got so many books and you're always kind of constantly coming out with them. Does, like you mentioned, you had several stories kind of all in different stages. So do you kind of write them all at the same time, or is it kind of like you sit down, finish one, and then kind of a little bit you dabbled and you kind of move on to that one?
It really just depends on the story and how much it's driving me forward. I have written 2 books at the same time, and then eventually one took over and I finished it and then went back to finish the other one. Or sometimes I'll be stuck on a project and I'll be like, ew, this is horrible and no one will ever read it. And then I'll go to the next one. And it just really depends. Like, one of my series is Crossing Forces. Currently has 5 books. We'll have 3 more eventually. And when I was writing the 3rd one and the 4th one, I actually started the 4th one before the 3rd one. The characters were just talking to me a bit more. And then halfway through, I really got about halfway done with the book. The 3rd book character, the heroine's kind of bossy, and she was like, hello, you're supposed to be working on me. And then I worked on both of them for a couple weeks, and then eventually the 3rd one took over. Finished the 3rd one, which I guess is better because it's 3. And then I went back to the 4th one. So it made it easier, I guess, in the end, because I feel like they were done a little bit faster, closer to each other. Because I do work, I'm crazy, and I have 4 jobs, so I work a lot. So sometimes the writing falls to the wayside, which makes me sad. I get really grumpy when I don't write consistently. But it just depends. Like, for me, since I do work full time, I can't always just hammer the books out. I can't write a book every 4 weeks like some people can. So it really just depends on how I'm driven forward to that particular story. And if somebody else is talking to me at that moment, meaning characters, it just I don't know. It just really depends. If I'm struggling with a project, I have been known to switch focuses. But I don't generally have a problem with going back and forth between stories if I have to. I guess I prefer to write one at a time.
Hmm. So where do you, because I know too, on top of having like a jillion jobs,
Mhm.
you also are an editor, and like where
That's
do
what I
you,
do.
I know, and like where do you find the time to write?
I'm very lucky in the fact that I work at a shelter for teenagers, and I work at night. Right, currently working 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. and I work a 4-day schedule, so I get 3 days off a week, which is really nice because my job can be very stressful. So I'm lucky in the fact that I'm allowed to write at work. So I do most of my work at work. And then if I have an editing project with a deadline, then I'll have to go outside those hours and cram it in and get it done for my client. Because when I have an editing project, the client is first, and even my writing falls to the wayside, because somebody's paying me for a job. So that's just how it is. But and then I also work at the gym that I work out at, and we're just getting ready to reopen on the 1st, so that'll be fun, and I'll get back to quote normal next week because we've been closed because of the virus.
Mm-hmm. And I know, like, really quickly too, I just wanted to point out how cute your mug is with the
Oh, my dragon.
dragon, your
Yeah.
dragon mug.
This is Mr. Dragon. He's my favorite. He's a 22-ounce mug, so I can have a big girl cup of coffee.
I love it. And he's blue, of course.
Yes, he was a Christmas present several years ago, and I love him very much. And he's a little bit banged up. One of his little horns fell off, and I had to glue it back on.
Oh,
And he's got some chips. And I went to try to replace him, and they don't make them anymore. It was originally from Think Geek. So I'm stuck with Mr. Dragon. I have to protect him and care for him as much as possible. It's very hard to
yes.
find a extra large mug.
Girl, don't I know it. I've been trying to like I've have like 2 big mugs, and that is it. I can't find, all the other ones are small.
Yeah, I do have one that's really fun. It's almost as big as Mr. Dragon. It says coffee because adulting is hard, which is kind of my theme for life, I would say. That and boys are dumb. Those are my 2 mottos for life.
I can get behind both of those.
You can? Yes, that's good.
Yes. Yes.
And also a sidebar to the second one, boys and books are always better.
Yes. That is the truth right there. That's why we read so much romance.
Right? Or watch it on TV
Amen, girl.
or
Ooh.
listen to it on audio. I've been really into audiobooks lately.
Oh, I love audiobooks. That's a conversation for another time, but we will touch on that sometime.
Yeah, yeah. Love
Um,
audiobooks.
oh, so do I. So on top, like we already mentioned, you are an editor as well. But what is some prime advice you can share as an editor that writers should know or that they should think about for
Oh
their
goodness.
editors?
Oh, you mean like when you're shopping around for an editor,
Yeah,
or
when you're like shopping around or trying to find the right editor
uh-huh.
for you, because I know that's so important to find the right
It
fit.
is. It is. It is. You have to find somebody who is passionate about what you write and they want the best for you in your book, and that they're an advocate for you as well as, and also, well, number one, it's very hard as an author to put your work out there. So please don't. You got to have some thick skin, and as soon as you have this product here, whether it's ready for publication or not, the words that you write, whether you realize it or not, some of you and your soul is in there. So sometimes, well, no one likes being told that they need to work on anything. But as long as you understand where it's coming from an editor, it's coming from a place of love where they want to help you make that book the best it can be. But that being said, nobody likes their baby to be called ugly. So it takes some, it's very hard. So I always commend everyone, like people, authors find me, which is great. That means they're finding me organically these days. I have a website and everything with my editing stuff. Um, it's hard for you to put your work out there when you're shopping around for an editor, because you're going to find people who don't like you, like what you wrote, and you're going to find people who love it. You need to find that medium person that will tell you, I really like this, but so when I sample edits, so if you're shopping for an editor, if you find an editor who does not do sample edits, do not hire them. Don't consider hiring them, because that's how I base my quote. You send me 2,000 words, I edit it, and then I know what I need to charge you. And if it needs less attention, it's cheaper. If it needs more attention, it's more expensive, because um, I'm one of those editors, and some authors love it and some authors hate it, that if it bothers the eye, whether it's the teeniest thing like the word "the" is wrong in the sentence or in the wrong place or in a weird place, I mention it, because I would much rather you hear it from me than a complaint from a reader. So, I mean, and it does happen. There are unfortunately serial returners on Amazon, and they get to the point where they buy a book, read it, and then return it. And Amazon says, well, why do you want this book? Why do you want to return this book? You've returned so many books. And I hate those people, but they are out there. But one thing about those people is they can say the book had too many typos in it. And then what Amazon will do, this has happened to me before. It happened to me twice now.
I didn't know they could do
Amazon,
that.
yes, yes. And it's always the serial returners, because you can return on Amazon, and then Amazon, after your fourth or fifth, maybe sixth return, Amazon gets hip to it and says, what are you doing? You need to justify why you return this book. Which I like that, but people still do it. However, the reader's response can be, there was too many typos. And then Amazon will send you an email as an author or your ebook distributor and say, hey, this reader said this book had this many typos and you need to fix it before we can sell it again. And then they'll pull it from sale. So it's a big deal. But all the more segueing that back to choosing an editor, please choose well, and please shop around. And editors understand, like, nobody likes to work for free, but I'll do 2,000 words. So you get a feel of whether or not you're going to like me, and I'm going to get a feel of what your writing is like. And not to pat myself on the back, but I am a really good editor. I'm probably a better editor than I am a writer. But because I edit, it has ruined reading and writing for me. It takes me forever. But that, when you're writing, and you start working with an editor, if you work with the same editor over and over again, which is ideal. I have 85 to 90% of my clients come back to me, and it's always the same people. Like, I just finished I did 2 books in a row for one of my authors who lives in Nebraska, and I know her writing as soon as I get it. I know what she needs to work on, and I know if she learned anything from the last book that we edited. So, and I feel like you do. Whether you want to or not, I feel like you do learn stuff and you get better. And this particular author has a problem with passive voice. However, every book that we do, she gets a little bit better. So it's really working with the same editor is beneficial. So when you go to find an editor, please keep that in mind, that a lot of editors want to form long lasting connections with their authors because it is good for both of you. You get a little bit of a break. I always give my return clients a discount. And a lot of editors do that. So it's, like I said, it's beneficial for both of you. You get to know each other's writing. And then when an author hooks me on a series, I get to be the first one to see the second book or the third book or the fourth book. So, you know, there's that too. That's a little selfish reason, but it's there.
That's awesome.
And
And then so you end up learning some from your editor because you're kind of teaching some of your writers in that
right.
sense.
No, very. I think I'm a better writer because I'm an editor. And that was something that was you know, it happened over time. It wasn't like I woke up one morning and I was awesome. You know, it's built back. You know, it's definitely an overtime thing. And I feel like every book that we write as authors, the next one is better. The writing is better than the last one. And you know how you'll have a favorite series that's maybe 10 or 11 books or whatever. And then you know, at the beginning, it might be a little rocky. I don't care who you are. You could be J.R. Ward or Stephen King. If you have a series, the 10th book is always better than the first book. It just is what it is.
Absolutely.
You know the world better, you know the characters better, and if it's a series, you're seeing those characters over and over again, hopefully. But you know how you'll be halfway through a series, and let's just say book 6 or 7, and you're like, this one wasn't as good. You know, I didn't like this book
Mm-hmm.
as well. And then readers really like series. Series is kind of the way to go these days, I think. But
You previously, so we touched on it earlier, but you previously held an office with the local RWA chapter and had exposure to romance writers of all different subgenres and experience. As a new romance writer, what is important to know about the genre?
oh, so many things. So many things.
Pick like the top one.
Yes, I was the president of NT last year. But I've always held an office. Our group has like right now I'm the programs director. Unfortunately, our group has that same thing a lot of groups suffer from, where the same 5 people do all the jobs and just switch them around every year.
Pretty much.
We're a really big group, but for some reason people are hesitant to step up and, you know, doing something. But I was the president last year, and I love my group because we do get all those subgenres, everything from male to urban fantasy to cozy mysteries that have romantic elements. So I guess what I would say to a new romance writer is, please know your subgenre. Please research your subgenre. If you are writing what you are reading, and some people do and some people don't, I'll talk about that in a second. But if you are reading, say that you write urban fantasy, please read all the urban fantasies in the world that you can. A lot of times, if a reader, myself included, likes a particular genre, you kind of know what you get when you're picking it up. And I'm not talking about like you can't break rules. You can always break rules as long as you have good motivated reasons. But just know your genre. Don't have, let me see, don't have a 250,000 word contemporary romantic suspense. It's not going to happen. No one's ever going to look at that. So that's one of those things I mean by know your genre. Know what lengths you're going for, know what the ages of the characters are, which you can also play with that. You can break those rules. But that's what I'm saying is kind of know the basic rules of the genre. Make sure that if you're writing urban fantasy that you build that world. But on that same token, if you're writing romantic suspense, contemporary romantic suspense, you still have to build the world. No matter what genre you write, there's world building involved. Sometimes it's easier than others because you just know the world. Like you could have a Walmart down the street in a contemporary romance. You're not going to have a Walmart in space. You might. I don't know. They might get to space.
Yeah, give Elon
But
Musk time. So
yeah, right. You know, like it just depends. Just please know the genres and don't, you know, don't put a 60-year-old man with an 18-year-old girl because people are going to go, ew. Just, you know, for the most part. Maybe not everybody, but you know,
takes all types. Takes all types.
Right. But again, anything I say, if you have a good reason for breaking the rule, go for it. But length is one of those things that a lot of publishers like. You can get away with 100,000 words in an epic fantasy. You can't do that in contemporary romance necessarily. Some authors do break that rule. J.R. Ward's books are probably about 250,000 words a pop. She gets away with it. However, she's a number one New York Times bestselling author. She could probably write her name on a leaf and they would publish it. So you have to make sure that you're not Nora, you're not JR. So when you first start out, I understand that writing requires confidence, but just be realistic. You're not going to be really awesome when you start. You're just not. It's people have raw talent. That's one thing, but you're likely your very first book is not going to make you $1 million. Mm-hmm. Of course, there are things that somebody will be like, well, nah, she did. Well, just because she did doesn't mean you will. So just be a little bit realistic with it. Do your research when it comes to your covers. Go on Amazon. One of the first things I do when I come up with a title is go on Amazon and type that title in and see how many other titles are. Unfortunately, there are not that many that are, you'll find at least 1 or 2 books with that same title. It just is what it is. Lots and lots of romance books come out every month. There's lots of competition. But romance readers, probably more than any other genre, are very voracious. So it doesn't mean that your book will never get picked up, but they want more. So keep that in mind. That's a good thing about writing romance. But just do some research. Don't think that you're Stephen King right off the bat, and you'll be fine. And then join a writer's group and get critique partners.
There you go. Yeah.
Not your mom, not your husband, not your cousin. You need somebody who's going to be like, no, this sucks. You need to work on this. Hopefully with some tact where they won't say this sucks because that hurts your feelings. But
Yeah, but tough love, basically.
Yes, so you can learn and grow.
So one thing actually that I learned, and I was going to ask you about kind of what you've learned from the romance writers, but one thing that you kind of, you brought up as far as the research aspect of it that I didn't even think about, but Mia London had kind of talked about like Google like your name, like to make sure it's not like taken by like somebody else isn't writing under that name. And if they are, what they're writing, because like there was some strange because someone else had a child's series named that, and Mia writes pretty steamy stuff, so
yes, I have edited books for her before. That's a good idea. That's not a bad plan. Some people write with pen names. I write under my initials and my real last name, but she's a good friend of mine. But that is a good plan if you want to write. Personally, I don't like when I look at a book. It's a total personal thing. Take it or leave it. And I can tell it's a pen name off the bat. I don't like that. So I would say pick a realistic name for your pen name. I don't know. Some people use their maiden name if they're married. I don't know. I write different genres, and a lot of people recommend don't use the same name for different genres. I don't have time in my life to maintain more than one personality online. And so I don't care. Even if I write, honest to God, I do have a YA in the works, I'm still going to use my own name. Even though my other books are some of them are more steamy than others, but I look at it this way. When I was 13 years old, I was reading Harlequins with closed door, some open door, some consensual sex scenes that were like on the page. So I feel like I don't want to market to teenagers, but they're going to find it anyway. So with my YA, it's a teen pregnancy story. It has sex in it, even though it's off page. She's pregnant. But I feel like I'm still going to use my own name. It's just the marketing is completely different. So you just have to know that going in. But I feel like I do this with titles. I also I Google titles. I mean, I don't Google, I Amazon titles usually, but you could Google them too. And then that's a good practice to do if you're brand spanking new and you're coming up with a pen name. Make sure it's not in use, and don't pick something that is like, I saw one the other day that totally made me roll my eyes. And the book was a Wolf Shifter book, and the author's last name was Wolf. Now, if that's not a pen name, okay, you go ahead with your bad self. But I read it and rolled my eyes and went, that's a pen name. But I say always go to Amazon and look, because not only could you have the Mia London problem, you could also use a name, and then someone will get really mad and send you a nasty email saying, hey, that's the name that I use on my books, you can't use that name, which is not necessarily I mean, you can, but you want to be unique because you don't want readers to get you mixed up with another author.
Exactly.
And here's another tidbit, food for thought. Readers don't really remember the book title, but they remember the author name. So you could have a series of 7 or 8 books, and they're not going to remember the first book, second book, third book, but they're going to remember that they like that title, they like that series from Joe Blow author. So just remember that. So you definitely want your name. Your name matters. Your name means something more than the book title. That's why repetitive book titles don't really matter, in my opinion.
That's fair. Do you and have the romance did you learn that after writing so much, or did you kind of learn that since, like, I know that the RWA is full of like seasoned writers?
Well, probably a little bit of both, but other than, like I said, take it or leave it. A lot of it is opinion.
Mm.
But some authors will freak out if their book title is taken, or this is my book title, whatever. Well, there's it's gonna happen. You're
Well, as oversaturated as the market is, like you
right.
mentioned,
Yes.
somebody's going to have it
Yeah.
out there at
Yeah,
some
like
point.
the series I just finished editing for that return author of mine, her book titles are all one word. Hate to break it to you, but it's gonna be out there. One of them is unmistakable. It's been done a million times. You just hope that you did it better enough to be noticed,
Mm-hmm.
and then this is a whole nother conversation, but you want to make sure that your name is branded on your books and is the same on all your books, or as close to the same as possible, because like I said, readers don't remember titles, they remember the author.
That's a good point because then some of the titles are repetitive.
Oh yeah.
So it
Yeah.
doesn't matter to remember. It's like, which unmistakable book did you
Hmm.
read?
Right, right.
There are like
So
20 of
I
them.
mean, it is, even if you have 2-word titles or 3-word titles, it's all been done before. I mean, it's not about you not being unique. It's just that the fact that there's limited words in the English language, and you
Very
want them to
true.
be really catchy, and then every once in a while, you'll remember an author in a book that just won't, like the one that just came to mind to me is very unique. It's a very funky urban fantasy series. It's 5 books. It's hilarious. The first book is called Shift Happens. That is awesome. It's a play on words. And the author is a friend of mine now, but only because I stalked her a bit. But that's one of those titles that I just always will remember because it made me laugh. And
Mhm.
all of the titles in her series are plays on word. As you can tell, it's a shifter series. It's urban fantasy. It's got a kick-ass female. I mean, it's great. It's a great, great series. J.C. Mackenzie is the author's name. So if you have not checked it out, please do. It's great. It's first person. Some people like it, some people don't. She
Mm.
does it very well. I'm not a fan of first person books, but I couldn't put that series down. It's fabulous. But titles, sometimes people will remember them because they're catchy. They're awesome. But generally speaking, the authors or the readers will remember you, not your book titles.
Well, that pretty much kind of sums everything up for us then. So last question for you. Where can
Sure.
people find your books and how can they connect with you?
I'm everywhere. Um, I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. I'm mostly on Facebook. So if you really want me, I'm on Facebook. Um, and then I have a website, of course. My books are for sale everywhere you can think of. I have ebooks, paperbacks, and audiobooks. Um, and I also offer, like, if you ask me, you'd have to shoot me an email. But I always have stock. So if you're a fan of signed books and you really need a book that you really want this book and you need it signed, you can always shoot me an email. I send a PayPal invoice and then mail the book. So that's always fun. I sign it too, of course. Skipped a step. And so yeah, and I, like I said, I write under my initials. So like my Twitter handle, my Facebook page, they're all CA Zarek. And then so that's the @ symbol CASZAREK. And then that's also my email, ca@cazarek.com, if anybody wants to send me an email. I am taking editing jobs if anybody needs an editor and you want to try me out. So just send me 2,000 words in a Word doc and I send back a quote. But I love interacting with readers on Facebook. So definitely stalk me anywhere you'd like to.
Yeah, and I know you're so good at that because then you always get back to the readers
Oh, yeah,
as
I always
well.
do. I love answering the readers. It's a lot of fun. And I just chopped all my hair off today. I cut 14 inches off. So you can go on Facebook and see my pictures of short hair.
Yay. I feel like you did that for me, even if you didn't. I'm going to take that as like you
Sure,
did it
go
just for
ahead.
this
Go
interview.
ahead. Yes, yes, go ahead. And tomorrow I'm having LASIK, so I'm super excited about that.
Oh, I thought it was last week.
No, tomorrow.
Oh, I'm excited for you.
Yeah, I'm scared. I'm very scared also, but you know, it'll be okay.
Yeah, it'll
They'll
be fine.
give me value.
You'll enjoy it. I mean, like after the whole thing, like after you can
Yeah,
actually see.
yeah. I've been wearing glasses for probably 30 years. I was a child, a very young child when I got glasses. So I'm excited to not have to mess with contacts, not have to mess with glasses. So I'm excited about that.
Thank you so much to C.A. Zarek for joining me on the podcast. I'd love to connect with you, and here's how. Find me on Twitter and Instagram at Romance the Story. Book recommendations for this episode: King of Hearts by C.A. Zarek and Highland Oath by C.A. Zarek.